Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Information Security Threatscape session. You're in Coral 1, if hopefully you're in the right place. My name is Sharon Wong. I'm the acting ICSD administrator. And if I could just remind everyone to silence your cell phones, either turn it off or put it on silent mode. And if you do need to exit the session before it concludes, if I could just ask you to quietly exit so we kind of keep the presentations. What I'd like to do now is introduce our three speakers here. Each of them will be speaking, and to my immediate right is Mario Balakgie, and he is the director of the cybersecurity practice at Worldwide Technologies, Inc. He joined Worldwide Technology in 2013 after 20 years of professional experience in security in both the government and private sectors. During his tenure with the government, Mario served as the Chief Information Security Officer for the Defense Intelligence Agency, where he was responsible for information technology, data integrity and security, and network communications. In his executive role, Mario was instrumental in the establishment of key global information security capabilities for the intelligence community involving mitigation of advanced threats and implementation of security readiness and monitoring practices. He has served on special assignments to include the largest ever technology exploitation and forensic mission searching for evidence of weapons of mass destruction. Mario's information security expertise has been called upon for congressional testimony that ultimately established today's federal standards for cyber protection. As the National Security Practice Director, Mario delivers consulting services to clients by working with executives and addressing the demands of security on a global and enterprise scale. He leads the security practice that has expertise to assist clients in defining comprehensive security and privacy programs mapped to business imperatives. This includes advanced technology solutions to support a wide range of clients and working with them to meet organizational requirements for establishing, implementing, monitoring, and maintaining a highly capable security program. To the middle is Derrick Harcey. He is the Enterprise Security Architect at Oracle. He is a PE and a CISSP in the Public Sector Technology Organization. He has specialized in security and identity management technologies for the past 16 years. In this capacity, he is involved with solution architecture design of Oracle deployments, which include mobile security, identity provisioning, compliance, access management, federated identity, directory services, web services security, and database security that align with government security standards. He is actively involved in enterprise security architecture and solution design with many federal, state, and local projects. And toward the end of the table is Michael Powers with the DLNR, Department of Land and Natural Resources for the state of Hawaii. Mr. Powers has been involved in computer IT for over 30 years, from IT systems and network design to email, internet, World Wide Web rollouts to training in IT support at the university, college, and private classroom level. For more than 15 years, he has been involved in IT security, in systems administration, training, support, and auditing for such firms as Boeing, Visa, and SAIC. Before moving back to Honolulu last year, Mr. Powers was head of IT security for Celera Genomics, the firm that first decoded the human genome, a billion-dollar firm. Celera was purchased by Quest Diagnostics in 2001, and Mr. Powers was asked to stay on, which he did for another couple years before moving back to Honolulu in 2013. Mr. Powers now works for the state of Hawaii in information technology for DLNR and sits on the statewide task force which is writing the new IT security policies for the state of Hawaii. Mr. Powers also owns powersgroup.com, an IT security resource site which provides IT security resources. He is a member of the local chapters of ISACA and ISC2 security organizations. Mr. Powers taught many computer classes in the 90s in Honolulu at his training center, but was also asked to teach at Kapiolani Community College and Brigham Young University, and was an ongoing guest lecturer at UH, HPU, and HCC. Mr. Powers returned to Berkeley in 2001 for additional work experience and to complete his education goals. He graduated in 2005 from the University of San Francisco with his degree in information science with honors at the top of his class. He achieved this while working as head of data operations at UC Berkeley and teaching part-time at Berkeley City College. Mr. Powers has over 15 years in IT security, has the top 4 certifications in the industry, and has been a key speaker for many organizations, including ISSA twice. So at this time, I will be handing over the session to Michael Powers, and we'll just start this way. And they'll have about 15 minutes each to talk, and I think they're open to questions during their talk. Is that correct? So, Mr. Powers?
I'd like to deal with this concept of private, because we're looking at, things that we're trying to protect, and we have this big notion of a privacy or a private thing. I want to take a look at it as a beginning of how we communicated. We used to just talk to people, and we could tell somebody our secrets, and then we decided to start writing them out or printing them in leather or whatever originally, and then along came the printing press, and we were able to mass produce this message delivery mechanism. And obviously we know what happened with the computers and networking, where you can now share that message to every computer, and then certainly we probably didn't even expect how you were going to use it on the internet, where you could post it and have the whole world effectively see your message. Cloud services are coming along, and I think the security in cloud, and Keone mentioned earlier today, I think cloud is going to offer a big new storage mechanism where our message is going to be a lot of different places, so that we're able to get our messages. You already can find out that you can get your messages on your phone, and you can put something up and then go home and get it on your computer and stuff like that. So that delivery and storage of messages is interesting too, and very flexible. The big thing, I think, that's the challenge here is big data that different people will talk about. That's the first time that the message has actually been changed, and we now have relevance attached to your message. Google does 3 billion requests a day, and they take all this data about requests, put it together, and make a new message out of it, and give people's requests demographic information and other relevancy issues. So that's a huge change, I believe, to the message. So we have to think about how do we protect our messages when the message isn't even the original message. So you're going to want to think about your issues. What came out from our private concepts of life is we moved toward this concept of privacy. We want privacy for our stuff. And we want to look then at what are some of the problems with protecting our stuff, protecting our privacy. We certainly have attackers. We have people that used to be what we called script kiddies that moved on to hackers to move on to what now is considered the gold standard of being a bad guy, and that's advanced persistent threats. Somebody that has the money, the time, the energy, the funding, the drive to really go after your stuff. And then you've got all the things that are under your control, mobile devices, and how the expansion of mobile devices are out there. Mobile devices that carry your data, carry your message, but now are available to Wi-Fi, available to all different kinds of perusing that you wouldn't have originally expected. And then we have people with their own devices, personal devices, that are moving into your network that are maybe not securing them the way that your original rules said, and they have access to your networks. Not even counting, and I forgot my example. I had this. I bought a USB at Best Buy the other day, and I opened it up, and I just, on the back was a barcode, and that was the way they billed for it and everything. But I opened it up when I got home, and there was a little white plastic tab in it, and I realized it was an RFID. So you are giving people information. There's information going on out there that you're providing. They're attaching the RFID chip information from what you purchased to your credit card, to your points card, if you said use my points card and stuff like that. And they're creating a message about you based on devices that you don't even know they're being used. That comes up a lot. You'll hear about today and during the conference probably in privacy issues and the changing in the nature of privacy. We've got our aging workforce. I happen to be part of that, of course. And what's the problem? What's the problem with that? A lot of the messaging is non-documented abilities that aren't well documented in your systems, and just institutional knowledge that your aging workforce is going to take with them when they leave. Does anybody remember basically how to program in COBOL? You know, something that we did a long time ago. So that's a very real thing, that people taking the message, taking the information that's critical to your organization with them is going to cause you, issues in the future. And then I just wrapped it up with backups. People talk about, oh, we've got a backup, but then the backup fell off the truck and didn't realize it was in clear text and didn't realize it was non-encrypted and things like that you have to deal with. So there are a lot of different threats to the way you keep your privacy. The biggest deal about a problem with privacy is when it gets breached, when your privacy becomes, not as private, if there's a hole in your privacy, if there's a hole into your informational systems. HIPAA, healthcare information that I'm most familiar with right now, says that your personal healthcare information is not considered PHI, personal healthcare information, if it's encrypted. It's considered protected health information. So one of the things that you can do is simply encrypt information to keep it out of the spectrum of when it's being breached. What are your other costs or issues? Certainly it's regulatory, HIPAA, PCI for credit card information, FERPA, some of these others for educational, not counting your brand reputation and actual financial losses that you get when you get fined. We've heard about all the fines that Target and some of these other people have had when they lost stuff. I mean, there's real money at stake, not even counting the fact that, well, I don't think I'm going to go shopping here anymore. I'm going to go shopping across the street where they haven't lost my data, things like that. So what do you do? What can you do to deal with your data? You can put policies in place. I'm on the state council along with Alan and some of the others that are here, I see, and Michael. And we're doing policies for the state of Hawaii. We're really helping get strong policies that are based on standards and things that will help the state understand the security requirements for departments, for everyone. Things that you need to do on a regular basis to have control of your data so that you don't have a breach, so you don't have to answer to people, so you're not going to have these costs involved. You can do architecture. You can rebuild the hardware and have more controls on things. In the old days, we had IDS, intrusion detection systems. Now people are moving toward IPS, intrusion prevention systems, or combinations, intrusion detection prevention systems. More aggressive things. We used to have just firewalls, but now that's not enough anymore. You've got to get more aggressive in your hardware architecture. And your personnel is key to your safeguards as well. What happens if your people don't understand how to make a nice password, a secure password? What happens if they don't understand the controls you put in place? You can write all the controls you want. You can create all the security hardware you want, but if somebody tapes their password to the front door, and the janitor comes in and reads it and then goes into the system that's not turned off, and sitting at your login name, all they got to put in is the password, your security kind of goes down the drain. So here I've outlined a few of these, but this is some of the vectors that will enable breaches to happen. I forgot when I started, so I'm going to have to watch that here. Regulatory drivers, I think, are one of the things that helped me get into the industry, because the firm I went to work for had to hire a security person because regulations drove it. And I think you're going to see that more in the industry now is that regulations, whether it's healthcare, whether it's banking, and whether it's government and even international, if you're trying to do trans-border relationships, they are requiring things like information security offers. They're requiring policies and procedures. They're requiring annual reviews of your strategies, and they're auditing you. And if you flunk audits, there's real costs involved, that you're going to have to deal with. One of the things that I've done for several companies is the risk review. And you need to have a good risk team in your organization that takes a look at what are you up against? What are the attack options? What are the costs per attacks? And how many times are your attacks likely to happen? And you can develop a risk profile that way. Like I said, I'd mentioned some of the security architecture. There's very real security architecture now that includes external service providers watching your systems 24/7. People like SecureWorks from Dell, EMC, RSA have systems. Oracle certainly has a strategy, and probably Mario has a strategy or two. A lot of times people just don't have the personnel on board to watch your systems and even watch the security architecture on a 24/7 basis. So you might want to think about expanding your architecture and including service organizations that can help. People have breaches, or maybe they've been breached and they don't even know it. I always worry when an organization has no strategy for breach management, for incident management. Who do you call? I mean, it sounds cliche, but really, if a person just has something wrong with their computer and it's slow, and they really don't know sometimes in an organization who to call. And if you really are breached, then who are the team players that you go to deal with the breach? And what are the steps to deal with the breach? Do you have a forensic, even a program in place that can go find stuff, and what are the current issues? What are the really key issues that everybody's talking about that, boy, have you heard about Stuxnet? Have you heard about this? Have you heard about the latest whichever? And how is it going to affect you? And how does it affect your organization? When we did the security strategy for the state, one of the things that was critical was the standards-based. It was based on ISO 27001, 27002, which are the international standards for security based on programs that were designed in the late 80s. COSO, James Treadway's council on developing strategies for control frameworks. ISO, the International Standards Organization, or now international, it was the International Organization of Standards, that developed the ISO series. The United States has NIST, I forgot the code, but NIST is the American standard for their 800 series, which are the control frameworks that the government uses and that the state uses. There's also industry models from ISACA and ISC squared. COBIT 5 is one of them. So these are this is summary, some of the areas that you need to look out for. You can buy software, antivirus software or malware software, but there's some, you need more than that. You might need the service, and you might need special programs for training and stuff that really bring people up to speed. One of the things I remember was a couple Sundays ago on 60 Minutes, there was a big security advisor on there from FireEye, and he said that 97% of all the computers in the world have been breached. Boy, I really kind of felt bad about that. I said, well, then what am I doing here, And on their website, it says 95% of them are breached. So somewhere in that is a big number. Well, there's 1 billion people on Facebook. 3% that's not breached is still a significant community, and I like to think of myself as part of that community. So $11 billion lost in banking, Brian Krebs said on his website. And who paid that? It was the banks that paid that. So there's serious things that you can do to be involved in developing a strategy, watching over your organization, having a plan in place, and having something that people can count on that will, at least pull you through the tight spots on this. And I got the couple-minute warning here, so I'm going to run down here because everybody's got to have their. But here is, in summary, is I think is critical, is that most people don't have a real serious training program, or they don't have enough annualized training. And I think that's critical for your staff, for your security personnel, is that you have to have a strategy for how you deal with security, how you follow up on security, and I think that's my time. So we're going to allow for questions at the end, I believe, so we're still going to let you get back in for questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Michael. So I wanted to leave with, introduce 3 key points that I want to leave everybody with today. The first one is the number of attacks and the people that are performing those attacks and the sophistication of those attacks is only increasing, and increasing at a dramatic and alarming rate. That's the first point. Second point is everyone can improve their security posture. I got to stand up straight when I say that. Everyone can improve their security posture, right? And number 3, make sure that the resources that you're spending on improving your security posture are applied to the overall security posture, not just spending your money in one particular area or another. I want to talk about some of those topics in more depth. As was mentioned, I'm with Oracle, and there's a lot of things that we can do to put in place mitigating controls to improve your security posture. I don't want to talk about advanced and far-reaching initiatives. I want to talk about the realities of today. But first, I talked about attackers and threats. Who are attackers? The first time I heard of the concept of somebody attacking a computer system was back when I was in high school, 1983, the movie War Games, and the motivation of the attacker was what? He wanted to play a game, right? He wanted to play a game. He used social engineering attacks, he used brute force attacks, and various other attacks that compromised weak passwords to gain access into DoD systems, right? Anybody remember the system that he logged into? The Whopper, right? The Whopper, right? And it was a big mainframe, a bastion system that he was able to compromise and gain access to. Next movie, and I'm talking about movies. I was in LA last week, so forgive me for the references to movies. But the next movie that I recall, because I've been in this business, information security, for about 16 years. Before that, I was a developer for many years. But in 1995, a movie called Hackers came out. Everybody remember the movie Hackers? It was some really crazy, it had made no sense at all for your information security person in terms of what they showed on the screen, but the threats were real. And what was the motivation of those attackers, right? The motivation was, I want to impress my friends, I want to impress my colleagues, and I want to get the girl. I want to become elite. It wasn't financial motivations, but they did uncover an advanced persistent threat within a corporation that was the biggest attacker that they needed to be really concerned about. So I want to talk a little bit about what's going on today. Is there, cool kids that are really smart that we are mostly worried about and everybody else we're not so worried about? No. Today, the sophistication, the type of attacks, and the motivations is much different than it was back then. In terms of state-sponsored cyber terrorism, ransom capabilities, cyber crime, organized criminal rings. This highlights in the Wall Street Journal that security is no longer something that the geeks in IT worry about, like me, like all of us. Security is top of mind with our executives. Everybody understands that security is important, and there's a tremendous amount of spend going on to improve our cybersecurity posture. This from the Wall Street Journal in November doesn't go over public sector, but it goes over various different industries and the increase in spending for cybersecurity. If you look at the NASCIO study recently for state and local organizations, we also saw an increase in security spend in the last 12 months. However, also the CISOs of the states are saying that they do not feel that they're properly funded to fully address the cybersecurity concerns. So let's put that off to the side a minute and let's talk about some innovation in security. I talked about making sure that you spend your resources in the appropriate area. Let's talk about some innovation in security. And this innovation has nothing to do with Oracle, but it's something that's quite impressive nonetheless. Oracle has a lot of impressive security technologies. We'd love to talk to you about them, but I'm not here to talk about products. I'm here to talk about the overall state and the concerns in cybersecurity. There's a new technology that was released a year ago. There's over 200,000 installations and 27 million in revenue. Pretty impressive statistics. If you were a startup, you'd be funded and you'd probably have an IPO that was hugely successful, multi-billion-dollar organization. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? It's encryption technology that has created a wave of copycats. It's copied and being used, and it's a pioneer from Eastern Russia that is encrypting people's desktops with a technology called CryptoLocker. They basically, it's too much trouble to, capture people's passwords and credit card numbers and then try to sell that on an online marketplace or to pay a hacker to go and get, data for a particular organization. All of these things are happening, but this is brilliant because you're actually charging the end user for their own data, holding it ransom. If they don't pay you within 72 hours, you will destroy their data. So they've basically cut out the middleman. That's quite an innovation in security technology. Obviously not in a good way, but the point is that the attack vectors and the sophistication is increasing on a rapid and scary level. So let's see what this really means. What is the motivation for these people in doing it? It's financial motivation, of course. It's organized crime rings. This was an amazing statistic to me. If you look at how much money is gathered, and these are Interpol numbers, from stolen credit cards, $114 billion. Obviously, it's a lot bigger market than the crypto technology, but I think that might change. But what's interesting is that it dwarfs the cocaine business. So there's a lot of money and motivations, financial motivations here. And why am I talking about this? Because the sensitive and personal data, healthcare data, the privacy data, much of that data is held within state and local organizations. And that makes state and local organizations a prime target. And it's not just these attackers and the sensitivity of the data, it's also the obligations that you have as data stewards to comply with the regulatory mandates, from protecting taxpayer ID. And if there's a breach, you have to notify the IRS within 24 hours. Even more significant is complying with some of the recent mandates around the Affordable Care Act. In terms of if a data breach happens, you must not only notify somebody within 1 hour. So there's significant new challenges from a security perspective that must be addressed. At the same time, we have new ways of sharing that data with our citizens and our end users. Mobile is becoming huge, and that is an attack vector because it is something that exposes the data outside of the network perimeter down to the device that we're all carrying in our hands. We all expect to be able to use our mobile device, and it opens up a new attack vector. It's scary that the number of people using, in state and local organizations, using mobile devices is a very large percentage, 40%, but the people that have a process or a program for protecting that data is even lower than that. So the point is that these new ways of sharing data are making us more vulnerable, and it becomes more challenging. This data from the Verizon Data Investigations Report, they basically go over an annual summary of what types of attacks have taken place. We're seeing that there's a large amount and increase in hacking. Now, there's different types of attacks, but the point is that we're seeing a big increase in hacking, a little bit of a fall off in physical attacks. It's much easier to sit in front of your computer and infect a bunch of computers and throw a denial of service attack. We've seen some very high-profile examples of that in the news recently with Sony. It's almost like a soap opera playing out, where after they were originally embarrassed, we're seeing now that there's potentially political motivations behind the attacks. There's counterattacks by a corporation to try to ensure that the files that were compromised are inaccessible to the torrent sites. It's very interesting. Anybody that thinks security is boring, that might have been true 5 years ago, it's not true anymore. It's literally on the edge of your seat interesting. And with that, the types of attacks that people are using, back in the first example I used, how did Matthew Broderick get into the Whopper, right? He used a weak password. He also used, a sticky note that had passwords on it. So he used very simple attacks. to exploit lost or stolen credentials or weak passwords. Backdoor was another example that he also used back in that time. SQL injections are attacks or application bypass to get directly at the data. And brute force attacks. So these are some of the examples of the biggest types of attacks. These types of attacks aren't new, but what's interesting is that it's not just one attack, it's an advanced persistent threat will combine multiple of these attacks to first gain a toehold and then go deeper into your system. So just applying perimeter security is ineffective. We need to look much beyond perimeter security. And here's a statement from the White House Cybersecurity Task Force last year. Most attacks and exploitations can be stopped with good hygiene. What does that mean? What does good hygiene mean? You know, don't let somebody type in your kid's name in order to gain access to a backdoor in your system. That was literally what happened in war games. Joshua was his kid's name. He didn't even have to put a password in, just put it as a username, Joshua, and he's writing in backdoor. But bottom line is make sure that you have a good process in place. And we're looking to the NIST frameworks, as Michael pointed out. The NIST cybersecurity framework was released in version 1 this year. And obviously most state and local organizations are looking to adopt that. But it looks at current security posture, where you want to be, how you're going to get there, and then assessing your overall progress towards that plan and remediating any issues that come up. So it's very important that you have that plan. This next slide is interesting to me because I like this slide because the topic of the session, and this is what like when you play those video games, it says warning if you're subject to epileptic attacks, don't look at this slide. But this is one of those where the threatscape, this visualizes to me the threatscape. It's a tornado. A tornado will only exist under the perfect scenario, under the perfect combinations of humidity, pressure, location. The same is true for these data breaches. The attackers need to compromise multiple of these known attack vectors, and with good security hygiene, we can start preventing people from getting access to credentials by having multi-factor authentication, by doing risk-based authentication. We can start preventing SQL injection attacks by doing firewalling at the SQL layer, at the layer of where databases are trying to be breached by bypassing an application. We can put in controls to ensure that privileged users can't see production data. We don't want to have somebody that has the keys to the kingdom that can compromise the entire infrastructure. So these are some examples where we need to focus on the new perimeter. We need to focus on what is our sensitive data that we need to protect and lock down. Who are the people that we want to allow access to that? Under what circumstances? And what devices are they going to be coming in from? With cloud-based integration, we're dealing with not just devices that people need to come in from, but also where are they going to be accessing that data? How do we want to make sure that the user is who they say they are? And in order to do that, we need to think about a lot of new capabilities within an overall enterprise security architecture. As was mentioned earlier, I'm an enterprise security architect. I like consistency. I like to make sure that this application that has sensitive data has the same process for identifying who the user is as this other application. And if there's a privileged user that's coming in, maybe you want them, because of the fact that they have access to a sensitive data within a sensitive database, maybe every time they come into every application in your enterprise, they always have to do multi-factor authentication. Whereas me as a normal citizen that I'm just coming in to deal with the state, maybe to renew a license, single-factor authentication might be sufficient, but we can still put in additional controls around recognizing that there is potentially some attacks going on and mitigating those attacks. So within Oracle, we have been basically providing technologies to protect data for initially federal government deployments for over 35 years. We've effectively expanded our solution portfolio to include everything from application layer security, middleware security, database, operating system, and servers and storage and hardware. So we have a comprehensive set of services, but we also have consistency in how we apply security across everything that we do. It's important that you understand how to manage the overall health of your user community and understand who your users are that have sensitive access and how to issue credentials to them and maintain those credentials to prevent common exploits around weak and stolen credentials. We need to make sure that we use consistent ways to encrypt data on mobile devices and lock that data down and secure it from personal applications and data. We need to make sure that we have encryption in the database tier, not only when the data is traveling from the application tier to the database, but also every time it's backed up, every time there's logs within the logging mechanism of the database, the redo logs. We want to make sure that that's encrypted. Every time it's shipped off-site, encrypted. Basic controls around putting in place monitoring and auditing to look for anomalies of access that are not allowed. So all of these controls allow us to control the entire defense and depth of our architecture, starting with the data and how the data is accessed at the application tier and who the users are that are allowed to have that access. So within Oracle, two of the areas that really can assist in this basic controls to improve your overall security posture are looking at where is your sensitive data, how do we put in place preventative and detective controls so that we can ensure that the data is sufficiently locked down. And the example I like to give there is we know that basically if you look at the overall cybersecurity spend, about 70% of that spend, and this isn't just across state and local organizations, all organizations in general, is around perimeter security, network security, firewalls, intrusion detection systems. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but that's not the only thing that's important. It'd be the equivalent of, the armed guards at a bank are a great thing, right? I could hire, 1,000 armed guards and put them all the way around the bank and then throw all the money in a big pile in the center of the room. Is that going to be a good strategy? No, we need to have defense in depth. We need to have the appropriate controls at every layer of the architecture. The sensitive data or the money in the bank, we want that to be behind a vault, behind a locked door. So with that in mind, just keep, there's a significant investment everybody's making in improving their cybersecurity posture. Please just recommend that you look at the overall health of your enterprise architecture as it pertains to security. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. It's all about security. Okay. All right, let me get back to what I was saying. So Michael and Derrick explained very well about the threat landscape and the challenges that you face as an organization in getting to where you are protected. I would say to you that it's time for us to get mad in the sense of what is it that we have to do to effectively thwart and protect ourselves against the bad guy. There's a change, there's a shift in the way and thinking around security. And that really transcends, I would say to you, three things, okay, that we need to think about. The attack surface is far greater. We no longer rely on a network with a device. Now it's things in our hands. So what we've done is we've taken the attack surface and made it exponential. We have also taken and allowed the proliferation of the attack model to be far more sophisticated. So that means as a professional, it's harder for me to understand or to come and really prevent the attacker because it's a complicated threat and it's a complicated solution. So in this case, the cyber analytics as a next security dimension is really what I'm here to explain. So when you look at today's threats, right, anybody can be the victim. So you heard I used to be a federal employee. We thought at one time it was just the government. We know today that's definitely not the case. Any one of us is the victim. The culprit continues to be a sophisticated or a hacker that has greater means than ever before. And what are they motivated by? You heard from my colleagues, it's financial gain or other kinds of gain. And what they're doing is they're taking malware as the most persistent and effective way of coming at the system. And therefore, they're getting better at breaching and getting around our capabilities. And why is that? So when you look at down a little bit of memory lane to Derrick's discussions about what happened in the past, in the last decade, we've used a variety of capabilities, starting from firewalls, with antivirus, moving all the way down to application controls. This is what we typically do today. Why is that no longer effective? Because the attacker is getting around these security controls. What they're doing is they're using valid credentials, valid capabilities, and you're not seeing them when they come in. This traditional approach is called blocking. So in other words, you know what it is, you know how to detect it, and when it comes, you stop it. So the perpetrator is saying, okay, I'm going to go around. And I'm going to go around by being and looking like a valid user. So when you talk about exploiting, this is a great way that a perpetrator comes in. So why is it that today's attacks are hard to see? Well, because they're new, right? These are the way that an attacker comes at you now. 0 day means there's no way to see it. Spear phishing is another avenue that comes where it's directed against a particular person. It's a targeted attack. Sony is one of them. It's timed. It has lures. It's social media. You see all these today. So what that does is it says the traditional approach of blocking and preventing, I know what it is, I block it, I prevent it, is no longer adequate. So the methods of making or moving forward into something that's more adequate is really comes into what we call 3 things. Identity management, know who it is that's in your network, analyze the packet and logs. That means come in and look at everything across your network and then putting a big data analytics so you could determine what's coming, how long has it been, and where is it going. So in order to do this, it's called a new security approach. The new security approach says, I take the past of signature-based, I still use it, but now I apply a greater level of detection and intelligence-driven. Now I'm looking at all my activity that is coming across, and I'm making some judgment through a variety of advanced technologies, what is going on in my environment. With that, there's a shift. Today, or I would say typically, most organizations spend 80% around prevention. We're suggesting that a shift into splitting up from prevention, monitoring, and response. Prevention, monitoring, and response gives you a blended environment of knowing and making sure that you're able to do multiple things to prevent the advanced attacker. And by the way, I'm a proponent of not calling it advanced. I say it's what the attacker does today. It's not advanced, it's what they do. So what is cyber architecture? A cyber architecture really is best practices around a number of things that you already do today. It's a security architecture design with good, solid governance, risk, and compliance in play. You're doing packet capture and log analysis with a big data and visualization tool. You're improving your security response and your forensics. Why is it? Because this is the state of affairs today. So when you think of it in that sense, it has to be multi-vendor, right? If you've already made investments, the last thing you want to do is take out your current investments and say, oh, I got to put new technology in place. And it also creates a greater level of competency around what we call key security technologies. But before you go down this path, this is what I tell every organization to do. Where are you in a readiness? And so what I'm going to show you here is a readiness model based on 1 to 5. You should recognize this. This is a Carnegie Mellon software maturity model that has been adapted for security. And basically it says level 1, you're at the lowest end of readiness, whereas level 5, you're at the best. So the first thing we tell organizations is understand where you are in this readiness model. And then make investments, and Derrick touched on that, make investments in the areas that matter the most to your business. And that could be different for anyone. But the key here is to say, okay, if, for example, my network security protections are between 1 and 2, which, by the way, most organizations fall, what do I need to invest in to go from 1 and 2 to 4 and 5? And how do I plan for it? This is something that board of directors and CEOs are constantly calling for. They all know they got to do something, but they are saying, hey, you can't invest on everything. What is it I need to invest in? So the first thing is assess your readiness. What do you want to improve? What are the investments to take you from the left to the right? Once you do that, now you start to appreciate what are the advanced cyber analytics that you need to put into place, okay? And in this case here, getting back to what I started to say earlier, on the left side here are your traditional security feeds. These are typical sensors that are in place today. Remember what I said, by themselves, they do preventing and blocking, not sufficient. So now what you do is you start to build a correlation activity, and you add in, on the right, new feeds, non-traditional feeds, that help you understand what's going on in your network, feeding into a centralized environment of cyber analytics. The centralized environment now gives you enhanced reporting and monitoring. It gives you the ability to take your SIM tool to a next level of capability. It allows you to do answer questions about who, what, where, and why by using big data. What does that architecture look like? Well, it starts, and this is typically what every environment has, right? This is nothing unusual. I'm certain whatever your organization is, you have what I'm going to show you. You start with an infrastructure layer. Your infrastructure layer brings in network computing capabilities and storage that create some sort of environment around data feeds. Bring those, add to that your security sensors, intrusion prevention, host-based systems, auditing for logging, failed attempts, okay, unusual activity. Bring that on top of that near real time with a cyber analytics environment, okay? Now you've got better situational awareness. Now you've got to see what I call moving the hay to find the needle. Not necessarily finding the needle. Let's be real here. You're moving the hay to focus on something that says, pay attention to this, it is unusual. From that point, now you have response, you start responding, and you start putting better management capabilities around it. Where does all this take you? Okay? I'm going to talk about the before, during, and after. You're now enhancing your before capabilities. You've got advanced analytics that are telling you what's going on before a capability or an attack comes at you. And the during, you're reducing the time that the attacker is on your environment. And hopefully that means you're able to react and respond. And then in the after, now you could do some deeper forensics to assess what is happening in my environment. So what this model says, I'm always going to get attacked, I'm always going to get breached, and I'm going to adapt. Okay, because you can't prevent everything. And in the adapt stage, now what you do, getting back to the maturity model, is you make improvements. If you're now you say, okay, what do I got to do to improve? What are the things I need to adjust and change? And you make that shift. So this is, in a short version, the advanced cyber analytics. This is where I think every organization needs to really put their arms around. Once you apply this, now your use cases come into play. And let me go right down what those use cases are. Now you're able to better detect what we call security event stratification. In other words, where's an event that I need to concentrate on? I concentrate on it right away. I also am now able to go into malware or forensics analysis. What malware exists on my environment? What's it doing? I focus on it. Now I'm also able to do an exploit and attack prediction. I'm seeing activity that doesn't make sense. I'm not sure, or maybe I start focusing on it. I'm doing a little predictive analysis. Now I can do some immediate countermeasures. I'm addressing the insider threat, okay? By the way, I just read a statistic, 75% of intrusions are insider-based. Very interesting. So now I'm looking at internal capabilities and security issues with insiders. And then enterprise risk management. I know probably there isn't anyone in here that doesn't have to be compliant with something. So now you're looking at where am I compliant, where am I not compliant. And then incident management and forensics, right? Where did the attacker go? And then fraud detection. Those are the use cases that we think by applying a cyber analytics you're more effectively able to address. So in closing then, key takeaways. Everyone's likely to be breached. No one's immune. That means you got to change from prevention to a detection, which has become absolutely essential. The approach must be multi-technology, multi-vendor based, because everyone buys different things. You need to leverage them. And then approach it from an enterprise level where continuous improvements are always part of the game. So what cyber analytics then provides you with is the ability to address the attacker by applying your own advanced capabilities, right? And this is what I go back to in saying we have to get mad and we have to get serious about this. And then aligning IT enterprise with security and big data and having all the abilities to address those use cases. I went through it real quick in the interest of time, but I appreciate your patience and why I brought up the presentation. So thank you. So I think at this point we're open for questions.
You're going to have to get the individual workforce of people involved in security. Security can't be driven by a small little team of experts in the back room. It's got to have a full corporate group playing in the game, because this is a serious thing. And I think training brings to the table for your workforce how much of a player that they are in having a secure business. And everybody knows about it now with all the press and everything. They know about the downside to bad security. And when they start understanding that it affects their bottom line, affects their ability to have a job or their stock options or whatever, they're gonna, I think, wanna be more involved. I think companies they always cut training first when the budgets go south, I think that's a real bad mistake, because that is one of your key vectors is individuals.
Yeah, I mentioned briefly too the cybersecurity framework from NIST. Part of that is the NICE. Basically, it's not just training of the end users, but it's a training and career path for information security professionals as a recommended way to improve everyone's knowledge of security in general. I think that's also important. Well, I've been in security for a long time. I remember a time, you mentioned, end users can click on something in an email, and that's often an attack vector. 10 years ago, I was working with a colleague of mine, and there was something in our personal lives that we were both interested in running, and we were racing in marathons and things. I sent him a link in an email, where I forwarded him a link, and he said to me that when I got to work that day, "I can't believe you sent that to me." I'm like, "What do you mean? I just forwarded you an email." There was a link in there. It could have been an attack vector. It could have been some virus. I'm like, "Well, did you go check it out? It was really cool." He's like, "I would never click on a link in an email, right?" And he's, "I can't believe that you would do that." He would send it to me. I'm like, "Okay, I guess I could have put some funny characters in it so that you." But I mean, those are the things that I think today most end users would not, necessarily think twice. I think there's more awareness now than there was back then. But that attack vector is an important one. I don't know.
Well, my only other comment is, the best thing to do is turn user access off. But that's not going to work. So I would apply some other technique, okay? I think, look, it's hard for users who just want to use the computer, right, to get their work done. So we have to make, as security professionals, we have to make it better in terms of fail-safe, and we have to implement. We still need smart and awareness and users to understand what they shouldn't do, but ultimately it's got to be something that we address and we do a better job at.
The time, but it's about a little past 11:30, and I don't want to keep you from lunch. I wanted to thank our speakers again, Michael, Derrick, and Mario. Thank you very much. So if you could head back to where we were this morning, at the Coral 3, 4, and 5 for lunch. Thank you.